Hi, everybody. Welcome to our C3 Church Carlingford online. My name is Richard Botter. I'm the senior pastor of the church, and it is absolutely delightful to have you with us today. And I want to share a message on prayer with you. We're in a series on prayer, and we're going to do this series through the year. Now in January for 4 weeks, in July for another 4 weeks, and then there's another 3 weeks or so that we're going to do a bit later in the year. We're just kind of working out where best to slot that into the year. You know, in Luke 11, Jesus, his disciples ask him perhaps one of the greatest questions of all time. Lord, teach us to pray. In response, Jesus gives them what I would regard as, well, the model of prayer, the greatest prayer of all time, of all history, the Lord's Prayer. Throughout the year, as one of our major preaching themes, we're exploring the power and the practice of prayer. Using the Lord's Prayer as a base, we'll seek to develop our own healthy, sustainable rhythms of conversation with God. We're pitching the series for people who don't consider themselves to be ninja prayer warriors, but who would still like to grow in their relationship with Jesus. It's going to be a wonderful journey of discovery. Lord, teach us to pray. Some of us are more familiar with prayer, receiving answers on a daily basis. Others of us want to pray, and we struggle to pray. Well, it doesn't really matter where you fit in the continuum of praying. This series will be for you. We want to help each of us develop a renewed conversation with God. The conversations will ebb and flow, and God will tell you things you never knew and ask you things you never told. Sometimes he will suggest a rest or a particular path, but mostly I've found, most people in prayer find, that God will follow your lead, accompanying you every step of the way. We're taking a map with us, of course, the world's most famous prayer, the Lord's Prayer, given to us by Jesus himself, and for this very purpose, to teach us to pray. In these old, commonly familiar words, we're going to discover 9 different paths of prayer: stillness, adoration, petition, intercession, perseverance, contemplation, listening, confession, and spiritual warfare. And our journey is paced around an easy 4-step rhythm. P-R-A-Y. Pray. Pause, rejoice, ask, and yield. Pastor Linda did a magnificent job of leading us through that rhythm on the 7th of January. This rhythm gives your prayer life a light and easy flow, whether you're on your own or praying in a group. And last Sunday, Pastor Justin took us another step on the journey of prayer, reminding us of some of the most foundational concepts of prayer: the need to keep it simple, keep it real, and keep it going. I know I could have done with that advice when I was embarking on learning to pray. I had some very grandiose thoughts about prayer and what it was and what it wasn't. And, well, let me tell you, I never lived up to many of them. I felt incredibly discouraged, but I learned how to pray, and now I know a whole lot better. Having established the need to keep it simple, keep it real, and to keep it going, where do we actually start in prayer? Often when we start to pray, it takes time to quiet and to settle ourselves, to clear our busy minds and refocus on who we're praying to. That's why it's so important that we learn to be still. This is the first step of a deeper, more productive, more effective prayer life. Stillness and silence prepare our minds and prime our hearts to pray from a place of greater peace, greater faith, and greater adoration. When our kids were little, I would return from one of our mission trips to India, and I would sometimes walk through the door only to be greeted by one of them yelling, "Dad, have you got something for me?" "Well, I'm so glad you've missed me," and would be my common retort. Any chance of a hug? I wanted them to acknowledge my presence properly before bombarding me with requests. To me, in the eyes, I wanted them to look me in the eyes and simply say, "Welcome home, Dad." When I think of how Jesus teaches us to pray in the Lord's Prayer, I reflect on this being his starting posture for prayer. I think Jesus models this in the opening lines of the Lord's Prayer. Before we launch into a long list of all the stuff we need, daily bread, forgiveness of sins, deliverance from evil, he tells us to pause and to address God affectionately as our Father and respectfully, "Hallowed be your name." Note, affectionately and respectfully. Let's read again. Yeah, read it with me. It's coming up on your screen. Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 to 13. "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one." Prayer can easily become a frenetic extension of the manic way we can all live at times. Distracted and driven, we can easily step into the courts of the King without stopping, without introduction, without slowing our pace and lifting our face to meet his gaze. Yet if you have ever read some of the best writers on prayer, people like Richard Foster or E.A. Bounds or Dallas Willard or John Wesley or Peter Gregg, you'll know that they teach us that true prayer is not so much something that we say, it's not so much something that we do, it's something we become. It's not transactional. Prayer is relational. It begins with an appropriate awareness of the one to whom we come. Of all the topics I have on my bookshelves, prayer is probably the one that I have the majority of books about in terms of spiritual disciplines. I have read book after book after book on prayer. Thin, large, oh wow, so many different books. It probably reflects the sense of mystery of prayer, probably reflects a sense of my own journey and making prayer a real passion in my life. Probably reflects the fact that at times I just didn't know what the heck was going, so I thought I need to read something more and get some more insight. My prayer journey started much like many others, with more fumbling along the way than guided instruction. The disciples had the sense to ask Jesus to pray, to teach them to pray. And interestingly, they would have known how to pray because they would have been taught in a fashion within the synagogues. And yet all the same, in meeting Jesus, in following Jesus, they realized Jesus had things to teach them about prayer. And as I've reflected on that thought, the disciples asking Jesus to teach them to pray, I'm aware that I can learn in prayer, that I have not arrived. In fact, the more I learn about prayer, the more I practice prayer, the more I realize I have much more to learn. It's not to say that I haven't been taught in prayer, though. The first lesson I remember, I was sitting in church. One of my youth leaders, a great man of God, a fellow called Mark Hancock, was praying in the service. And in the midst of his prayer, as part of the sense of confession, he prayed for those sins of commission and those sins of omission And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is he on about? And I learned something about myself and about prayer that day, that sometimes I need to be confessing the things that I have chosen not to do. I learned in prayer, just another element of prayer. And that's the first recollection of learning in prayer that I have. It's probably in year 11 or so, 16 at the time. And then I began a 6:30 a.m. prayer meeting every Wednesday morning for our youth group. I was often the only one there, I might add. But God led me along the way. And I learned how to pray by just simply being there and going, okay, God, I'm the only one here. Lead me to pray. Teach me to pray. And I worked over the Lord's Prayer. That's how I learnt to pray. After those fumbling attempts to pray, I came across the Ministry of Intercessors for Australia with Noel and Barbara Bell, two champions of prayer. Noel became a mentor to me. Under their guidance, I learnt more about prayer, going on prayer retreats with them and learning to pray, largely by praying in the company of others. And this is one of the reasons why I encourage everyone to join in the monthly prayer meetings and in person, preferably, so we can learn to pray and grow in prayer. One of the most powerful lessons in prayer that I learnt through Noel and Barbara was that they took waiting on God seriously. Noel was this giant of a man. He was probably almost a good foot taller than me. He was a big, tall South African guy, a brilliant architect. And he had a booming voice. And when he prayed out loud in spiritual warfare, let me assure you, everybody, the place quaked. But Noel could sit still in God's presence and wait on the Lord in a way that I'd never experienced prior to meeting them. Waiting in silence, getting still, perhaps with some instrumental music on in the background, but waiting, stopping, stilling our souls is the beginning point of real prayer. Well, it was incredibly difficult for me, let me assure you. I grew up with three brothers. There was activity all the time. We were always at one another, playing around, rumbling, all of those kinds of things. Stillness, what is that? I like to be active. I get things done. I love to tick things off the list. The stillness thing was a waste of time for me really early on, I have to say. At least that's what I thought, until I began to practice it. And as I practiced the art of stilling my soul, I realized the power it has for prayer. It creates perspective. Some of us will be familiar with a verse in Psalm 46, verse 10, where we read these words: "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Or as the New English Translation puts it, he says, "Stop your striving and recognize that I am God. I will be exalted over the nations. I will be exalted over the earth." How powerful is this? Be still. Stop your striving. Being still, stopping striving, is only achieved when we're truly reliant on God. When we understand the magnificence and power of the Almighty next to our weakness. The incessant activity of the person who has to make it happen leaves no room for stillness. Stillness requires faith, an abandonment to God, trusting in Him to bring about His righteous result. Stillness requires faith, for it reminds us that God is on His throne as creator and sustainer of all. Psalm 46 starts with these words: "God is our strong refuge. He is truly our helper in times of trouble." And the psalm carries on with situation after situation of calamity and natural disasters and human-made disasters, wars and terror. And then it is concluded in this call: be still. and know that I am God. Why? To truly recognize God as God, the creator and sustainer of all. This is where Jesus wants us to start our praying. Praying with faith is achieved by recognizing God for who He is in the midst of any and every one of our situations, even the most dire, the most pressing, the most distressing. Praying out our worries and concerns is so common. It's a practice that many of us have done and continue one way or another, but it doesn't come out of first being still. You see, if we are still, and let me assure you, it takes a lot of effort to still our souls. That's to stop the treadmill of thoughts going on in our heads and the emotions of our heart. It takes energy. It takes real work to do. But as we take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, which Paul reminds us to do, and if we truly still our hearts and our minds, if we still our souls before the Lord, we are recognizing God to be God in the situations of our lives. And when we place God truly on His throne over our lives and over each and every one of the situations, stillness results, yes, but perspective comes as well. Psalm 131 reminds us of the need to ensure that we've positioned ourselves properly before God. I often find people getting all out of sorts with their praying and they don't experience a rich prayer life because they're working outside the realm of their authority. They take on battles that are not theirs and all too often neglect the realms of authority which they are theirs to pay attention to, like their families, your workplace, your church, your friends, your family. All of those are the places where God has positioned us. That's where we're meant to be praying. Praying against this principality and that principality and power is important, and we'll talk about spiritual warfare later on in the series. But it's to be achieved most often united in prayer with others, so that when we hold up our shield of faith, it is interlocked with the shields of faith of those who surround us and are with us in faith. And in that place, we get true protection as we cry out for deliverance. When we step outside the context of the realm of our authority, guess what ends up happening? And we do it by ourselves. Any number of the arrows of the enemy come in from other directions. Here's how Psalm 131 says it. My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too wonderful for me. But I have calmed myself and quieted my ambitions. I am like a weaned child and with its mother. Like a weaned child, I am content. Israel, put your hope in the Lord. You put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. That advice is critically important. Be still, content. So how do you develop that discipline of stillness as you begin a time of prayer? Let me give you just 4 really, really simple, quick things to do. They're from this book, How to Pray, by Peter Greig. Really, really great book for you to read. The first one is this: relax, get comfortable. And the second one is this: breathe calmly, deeply. Third one is this: speak a prayer or a phrase. And the fourth one, repeat. That's right. It's really not a fourth one, is it? But you know what happens when distractions come. Just go back to the top and start again. Relax. If you're all a flurry, fussing over this and that, your mind is at 1,000,000 miles an hour, do something you know that relaxes you, that turns that off. Get a cuppa. Sit in a favourite chair. Turn off the music. Turn on some soothing music. Close the door. Do what you need to eliminate distractions. It's one of the reasons why people bow their heads and close their eyes in prayer, so that we're not distracted by the other stimulus that's around us. The pretty woman over there, the crying baby over there, maybe you need to put your fingers in your ears, whatever. Eliminate the distractions. But relax. And then when you're in that place where you're beginning to quiet your soul, where stillness is real, breathe. A simple exercise of deep breathing reoxygenates the blood, making the mind more alert. It lowers blood pressure and your heart rate. It reduces levels of stress hormones in the blood. It reduces lactic acid buildup in the muscles. It improves your immune function. And it increases physical energy and feelings of calm and well-being. Just a practice of deep breathing. So as you enter prayer, get comfortable. Breathe deeply. If it helps, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Get the carbon dioxide out of your lungs. And then the third thing was speak. Simply begin to speak. Perhaps in your mind, but if possible, out loud and loud enough for you to hear. And speak promises from God over yourself like, I am a child of God. I have nothing to fear. I am more than a conqueror through Christ. I am forgiven. I am washed clean by Jesus' blood. I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord. So right now, just for a moment or two, I want you to do this with me. I want you to breathe in slowly and deeply. And as you whisper or think, I want you to say these words to yourself or to say them out loud as you're breathing in. The Lord is my shepherd. You ready? The Lord is my shepherd. Now hold your breath for a moment, as long as you can. Become conscious of God's Spirit. And then as you exhale, whisper or think, I shall not want. You ready? Let's do that again. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Now, I've found that kind of practice, whether it's the practice of rehearsing one of the promises of God over my life, like, I am more than a conqueror, or this first set of phrases from Psalm 23. I've found that just putting emphasis on differing ones of those words or syllables times is really helpful. The Lord is my shepherd. 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 Just that movement of emphasis as we speak those words out. And notice it's helpful to say it out loud, loud enough for you to hear. In that practice, in that discipline, stillness begins to become real. Of course, in Psalm 23, we know that the Lord will lead us beside quiet waters. He will restore our souls. As you read on in the psalm. Once again, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. See, what we're doing in stillness is making sure that we recognize that God is truly on his throne. We're reorienting, getting the correct perspective for prayer, enabling faith rather than the worries that consume us day by day, the fears that confound us night and day. And that's why stillness matters. So to kickstart your prayer life in 2024, pray, pause, rejoice, ask, and yield. By keeping it simple, keeping it real, and keeping it going, and position yourself in prayer as your first posture in stillness. Let God be God. Pay attention to what God has truly placed in your orbit and begin your praying in stillness. Well, I hope that's been helpful to you today. I certainly have found myself as I've been preparing this message and as I will along the way as we go through this series, I know for me this is going to revitalize my prayer life, and all of us need that at different times. If you've responded in some way to the message today, we'd love to be able to pray with you. Maybe you want to know more about what it means to follow Jesus, or maybe you've been a follower of Jesus for some time and you simply want to recommit your life to Him today. Maybe something in the message has spoken to you today and you'd just like some prayer. If that's you, we would love to connect with you during the week. Please scan the QR code that's coming up on the screen or email us at prayer@c3carlingford.org.au because we want to stand with you in prayer. And if you've been a guest with us today and you like what you see, and you'd like to know a little bit more, we'd really love to hear from you. You can either email us at guestcard@c3carlingford.org.au or scan the QR code on the screen. The QR code will take you through to a secure page where you can fill in just a few contact details, and one of our pastors will get in contact with you during the week because we'd love to answer any questions you may have. Hey, if you're one of our regular members at church, we'd love you to know about our Vision Weekend coming up on the 3rd and 4th of February. On Saturday the 3rd, gathering at 9 a.m. in Carlingford High School Hall in Sydney. We're gathering together as a church community, our community in Carlingford and in Wentworthville, to really hear about God's priorities for us as a church in the coming year. We'll pray for everybody as well, prophesy over most people, I'm sure, as well. A really great time of testimony as well. Fantastic. If you can make it, we'd love to see you there. And on the 4th of February, the next day, Sunday, we're having a combined service with our congregations from Wentworthville and Carlingford together. And there, 9:30 a.m. service, we're just going to unpack that sense of vision to everybody a little bit more, in a preaching kind of mode. Rob and Beth War, our location pastors at Wentworthville, are going to be there. Sue and I will be there. It's going to be a great morning. If you could make that, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to seeing you in church.